conference is a panel on leadership and hockey analytics. And it's going to be moderated by Alison, Lukan, and I have a bio for Alison. Here we go. Alison is a co-organizer of the Ottawa Hockey Analytics Conference and the Big Data Cup, as well as a contributor for the Seattle Kraken, and also an on-air analyst for Root Sports Northwest. Specializes in data-driven storytelling in the world of hockey. Prior to joining the Kraken, Ms. Lukan covered the Columbus Blue Jackets for 10 years and explored league-wide issues from an analytics perspective. She has written for The Athletic, for McKeen's Hockey, Fox Sports, Yahoo Sports, and NHL team websites, among other outlets. She believes hockey should be studied as a science and an art, and seeks to meld the two through her writing. Prior to covering hockey exclusively, Ms. Lukan worked for 20 years as a strategic planning consultant, advising corporations across a variety of industries in the areas of strategic management, effective communication, organizational design, and knowledge management. Ms. Lukan has a bachelor's degree in leadership studies from the University of Richmond. Go Spiders. I will turn it over to Alison.
Boy, that bio just makes me sound old and busy. But enough about that. I am thrilled to be moderating this panel on leadership and hockey analytics with three tremendous leaders in this space. And let me introduce them to you quickly, and then we'll turn it over to them to share their wisdom. First, we have Ian Anderson, who is the Director of Hockey Analytics for the Philadelphia Flyers. He manages a team of full-time staff members there. He started with the organization in 2014 after spending the previous 7 years with the Washington Capitals. In 2012, Ian completed his master's in predictive analytics through Northwestern University. Welcome, Ian. We're so happy to have you. Next, we have Alexandra Mandrycky. I know you. She is the Director of Hockey Strategy and Research for the Seattle Kraken, a position she has held since June 2019. She and her group facilitate the use of data and technology throughout the hockey operations department. Alexandra previously spent 4 seasons as a hockey operations analyst with the Minnesota Wild, and she graduated from Georgia Tech in 2013 with a bachelor's in industrial engineering. And certainly not least, but only last in introductions, Jeremy Rogalski is in his 13th season with the Bruins and 5th as the Director of Hockey Analytics there. The West Springfield, Massachusetts native utilizes statistical data and tools to support the hockey operations, coaching, and amateur scouting staffs. A 2009 graduate of Bates College with a degree in economics, he joined the Bruins in November 2009 as the team's assistant to hockey administration and transitioned to video analyst in 2010. After 5 seasons in that capacity, he transitioned to hockey operations assistant, a position he held for 2 years. He was named to his current position on September 13th, 2017. Prior to joining the Bruins, Rogalski had previously held internships with the New England Patriots in their marketing and football operations department, and he currently lives in Duxbury with his wife, Melissa. So welcome to all of our panelists. Let's get right to the chase, and hopefully we can get all of our speakers on the screen. Talking about building a team, and Alex, I'd like to start with you if I may. You really had to build a team from scratch. What went into that process in terms of selecting your first couple hires and defining the roles that you wanted to fill?
Yeah. What was really nice about kind of building a team from scratch is that there weren't very many people in our hockey operations department kind of at the beginning. And as we were sort of working through different org charts, I didn't have to like convince anyone about, oh, we need to add one position. Like I was like, oh, we have this analytics team and it's 5 people, right? And it was kind of just end of story, which Ian and Jeremy could probably speak more to, you know, you have to advocate for these positions. And so we sort of structured it. I had a long look at, you know, different sports, hockey, different hockey teams, what roles are people sort of filling and what are titles and all of that. But we ended up with a data engineer, developer, 2 analysts. And I think that structure works nicely. And I think it's pretty common across the league. But as far as hiring, when you post a job description on Teamworks or whatever, there's so many applicants, and that process was daunting. But I think what's nice about the analyst hires, you know, a lot of analysts are doing public work. And so I was really fortunate to I had seen Namita and Danny, our two analysts, work in the public space, met them at conferences, and that at least sort of helped get the process going with them.
And that tees up perfectly to Ian. What I wanted to ask you is, you're with a very long-standing organization. So what's the flip side of that question when you're trying to introduce more work in the analytical space for an organization that maybe for a long time didn't even think about that, let alone think about hiring people to support that work?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. I started with the Flyers in 2014, early summer there, about a month after Ron Hextall was hired. And honestly, the short answer of it is it starts from the top. Whatever the person at the top says usually gets followed. So that is helpful. And in my case, I owe everything to where I am now to Ed Snyder, the late Ed Snyder. He was a progressive owner in so many different ways over his career, and with the franchise itself, he's changed the game in a lot of different ways that people don't even know about. But he was an early adopter from an ownership standpoint, and kind of, I don't want to say mandated it with Ron Hextall, but they came to an agreement when he was in the hiring process that was something that they wanted to do. So when you get the owner on board and he says, this is a priority for me, you get the GM that says, this is a priority from me. Honestly, I didn't face any pushback in terms of my role in gaining acceptance amongst the group when you have those people behind you. So that's really the short answer of it. I think most people would agree.
You're living the dream, Ian. That's awesome. and Jeremy, what was fascinating about your story is you really came up through this department, if you will, in a variety of roles. How did that inform how you have built out your team and how you help others take maybe a similar path if that's what they want to do and build their skills over time?
Yeah, exactly. It is an interesting spot. I think both Alex and Ian have actually had the benefit of working for two teams. I've kind of been with the same group for quite a long time. And as you mentioned, sort of an exhaustive list of roles there to start. But I think that's been a mostly good thing, maybe a little bad just because I started really young, right? So you've gone from somebody who was 21, 22 years old in an intern role, and you've kind of got to shift into more of an authoritative position, which can be a bit of a challenge. But I think exposure was truly probably the best part of all those roles, because you get a window into, here's how the coaching staff likes to work, here's how amateur scouting meetings are conducted, and you kind of can fit and think through the different needs and opportunities that you might be able to work with. So I think that was a huge benefit. And then I would also say that when I was first hired, we didn't jump into it right away. We spent a lot of time networking, so talking to people who had gone through building their own departments in other sports and learning about the positives or the pitfalls of, what was good, what was bad, what did you attack first, what were your biggest needs, which was incredibly helpful. And I owe a lot of thanks to those people for their time.
Awesome. And I'll remind our attendees that you can always submit questions for this panel in the Q&A. We'd love to hear what you would like to hear from them too. Alex, back to you. Your background wasn't always sport. You came to hockey is a fun story in and of itself. But are there specific things about managing an analytical team in the sports space that are different versus the non-sport space or any other technical field in general that you've learned?
I think kind of working in an analytics group for a team, it's always a push and pull. Oftentimes I think of us as we're kind of in customer service, and our customers are sort of all the different departments. And so I won't say you're not at the mercy of them, but it's, you don't typically, there's pro meetings, there's amateur meetings. I mean, maybe other teams have analytics meetings, but for us, at least, we're just involved in everything that happens in the organization. And I think when you talk about developers coming to the Kraken or any other team, if you're coming from working for Microsoft or Amazon, you're used to working on here's my project, here's my software development cycle, here's the release date. And certainly in kind of our analytics space, we have kind of products that we're working on throughout the whole season, but you're also, responding to questions from scouts, you're talking to the coaches, needs change day to day. And so I think some of the challenges are just, how do I shield my team from it feeling super hectic. Like I try as a leader to absorb as much of that as possible. And maybe Danny and Namita are listening now and thinking I do a bad job of that. I don't know. But yeah, I think as a leader, you try to make it so that the day-to-day, the analysts, the developers, they feel like very in control of their role. But kind of the nature of the sport is chaos sometimes.
And Jeremy, you've been in different sports, albeit in different roles. Are there interesting wrinkles that you see being in sport introduces to an analytical focused role or this department?
Well, truthfully, my exposure wasn't as great, I would say, on the football side in terms of the operation. But I think I want to echo what Alex just said too, because actually she and I talk about this quite a bit. I mean, I think the keys are balance. So how much time, we need to make sure our teams are, hitting on the right deliverables at the right times, and our work board could go on for years, I think, at this point. So it's just about trying to time things and get into projects at the right time. And how much time do you spend with your team working on the minutia versus all that time you're losing it in terms of outward integration or implementation or deliverables. So really, what she said about managing demand, I think is really key. What can I attack that allows my team to continue on their path, that they're currently working on, or, do we have to sacrifice something and try to hit on an important point that our group's going to really value.
And that brings up such an interesting question. I'll ask you all to chime in, but Ian, maybe you can go first on this. I think many of us experience that the more you move up a leadership chain or a management chain, the less actual hands-on work you're able to do. So can you explain how you balance keeping your hands in, keeping on top of what you need to know to manage technical experts, but then also evolving your manager and leadership skills as well? How do you do that? How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one, I'll say, I'm like, if I'm being 100% honest, I'm in the process of learning this right now, right? So for those of the people that don't know, I've expanded my team from 3, myself and 2 others, to now we have 5 total, and potentially adding a 6th here soon. So yeah, it's a question I'm asking myself and working through right now. But what I've settled on is that, you have kind of the day-to-day stuff that needs to get done, and then you have like the development projects that are more like we're trying to build something over a period of time, or a new tool or whatever it might be. And then there's like internal projects and tools. So like, how can we do our work better? And those things like service the group, the analytics group itself. And then you have like the strategic meetings, which like I'm sure Alex and Jeremy are part of, with like the overall management team, right? Like strategically, what are we trying to do this summer? The salary cap with this trade idea, or our roster. Like, so there's quite a few hats you have to wear. But yeah, I'm moving less and less out of the day-to-day stuff, to answer your question. I did a full circle there, I'm sorry, but I'm coming back to, I do less of the day-to-day things of just completing tasks and things like that. And now it's more of like managing the team's time and energy and where their work is going to be funneling into. So like ensuring that their work funnels into the strategic objectives that come out of the strategic meetings from the management team, if that makes sense.
It does, for sure. And Alex and Jeremy, I'll have you both chime in, because you've been more in hands-on roles and now you're not. So even if you could maybe share, Alex, first, your experience of balancing management versus technical application, and also, do you miss it? Do you miss being as hands-on?
My team gets mad when I show up on GitHub sometimes. Like if I just, I see a bug, I'm just going to fix it. Because it is true. Like, I mean, I think all of us, we wouldn't be in this role if we didn't really enjoy working with the data and working with the software. And it sometimes is like hard to give up it. But I think part of being a manager is empowering other people to solve a problem, right? Like, just because I could do something and I know exactly how to fix it, and I know exactly, what the coach wants, like it's better in the long run for the organization and for, the analysts to do it, right? And, I think over the course of this season, obviously being brand new, all of our processes were brand new. And so I would say, we're trying I'm trying to push down as much as I can, as Ian said, so that I can really focus on kind of the strategy side of things and making sure that I don't need to be the person emailing the coaches, right? That's totally fine if someone else from our team does that, and it helps foster relationships with them for the coaches and scouts and all that. So it is a challenge, and I guess, yes, we all probably miss getting our hands dirty in data.
And Jeremy, of course, your thoughts, but specifically too, how did you just find yourself having a knack for management? Were there things you did that enhanced your ability to lead, or things you still want to pursue to become even better as a leader and a manager?
Yeah, so I guess first I should address too, I was with Ian, so we were incremental hiring. Props to Alex for being able to conduct all those interviews simultaneously, because we've done 2 groups of 2, and that's been a bit of a challenge too. So we grew a group to 3 about 3 years ago, and we just finished. Ian and I were actually competing in the same pool for a couple of positions here, so we just grew by another 2. So I think as a group of 3, it was hard to separate. I think you're building all your building blocks on your back end, your front end, your models, and those are really your core pieces. And it was hard. I think your first try, you also don't necessarily get it right. You don't do a great job. You learn, you fail, and you have to come back and figure out exactly what you're trying to do. So that was very much a hands-on experience. I think now we really focused on trying to hire, I would call it leadership in our first round of hires as well. So I think we are starting to transition now to that point where I think Alex said it, like there's a lot of independence. You come in where you need to help influence a decision or focus on, how do you think this particular page is going to be most impactful, or what variables are going to be, important to this crucial model. But you don't need to sit over there and watch how it's made per se. I think you can just kind of check in and manage as the process unfolds.
Awesome. I always find it interesting that, I think people who haven't been in sport think that working in sport is a lot more glamorous than it often is, particularly a lot of our experiences on a game day. And so Ian, I'll ask you first, and again, I'd love to hear from everyone. What goes into motivating and rewarding your team specifically in terms of their work? Because it's maybe not what people who aren't in sport assume it might be. Maybe is it about seeing the team win? Is it something different? Are there unique things you found that really help keep your team going?
I think it's no different than any other, profession or anybody other's job, right? First thing I will say is that I'm a big believer that everybody is motivated differently, right? So first step for me is to try my best to understand or learn like what makes my staff tick, right? So somebody might enjoy me just coming over and saying, hey, great job on that thing you did or whatever. Another person might want have an ability to like shine in front of a larger group, right? Some people, it's just me fighting with the general manager to get people more money, right? Like, so everybody enjoys getting paid, and that's the ultimate sign of appreciation, right? Like you've done a good job over the long period of time, therefore we want to either promote you in title or in pay or a new contract or whatever it might be, right? So those are the things that I try to look to the most when I'm trying to help motivate our team or keep people. But again, I know I'll keep coming back to this, but it's just the other motivation is trying on a daily basis to communicate to them like where their work is going to land. That's like a good motivator for me, is to be like, okay, so I'm going to work on this project you want me to do. Where is it going? Like, how is this impacting the team, or who's going to use it, or who's going to even see this? What is it going to result in? A lot of people want to know that too. So that can be motivating to just say, hey, I have a clear vision for your work and where it will end up. So.
Jeremy or Alex, anything to add on motivating your team members?
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Alex, if that's okay. I realized I didn't answer your question about becoming a better manager too, which actually ties in, I think, with this answer as well, because I mean, we do 360-degree reviews, so I certainly take that feedback from my group and understand where I can be better, but it also is where you get that pathway sort of understand what's important to them. So I think, like Ian said, to some people in our group, it might be impacting how a process is conducted by having a different set of tools or something that, that results. We're all passionate in different ways, right? We wouldn't be here if we weren't. So it's just a matter of where that passion lands, like Ian said, and whether it's impactful or not. Some people want to, recommend a decision, and if that decision is made, then it's a positive, and others are just happy sort of being resourceful. So I think listening to your group and understanding and putting a group together where those are all complementary too. You don't want 5 people who all want to, necessarily compete with each other to have their decision made. So.
Anything more, Alex, from you?
No, I think they covered it great.
Well, then I'm going to give you this next question. We have some from our attendees, and I think it ties into this a little bit, into what Jeremy was just sharing. The question is, are psychometric assessments used in drafting to select new team members, ensuring the new person will perform well on a psychological level, be a good fit with the personality of teammates? And if so, how do they help getting more bang for their buck? And I'd even take that maybe a little bigger too, is how do you make sure that when you bring in someone, obviously you have a pretty good feel for their technical ability, but how much do you weigh and how do you evaluate team fit with members?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say at this point, I haven't conducted anything formal as far as assessments go, but I know, plenty of that's common across other industries. Yeah, I mean, I do think when you're hiring someone, it's not just about the technical skills. First you have to make sure, hopefully they like hockey or at least have an interest in hockey, because this is a tough sport to work in if you're not passionate about it. It's a tough, it's a pretty demanding industry, both in your sort of skills, but also mentally, when sort of the team success is measured by wins or losses, and sometimes you lose more than you win. How do we keep people going in those sorts of scenarios? You want to make sure people are motivated to sort of be a part of the team.
Jeremy and Ian, you both shared, that you're building your teams incrementally. Are there different things you look for or processes you undertake to make sure that the team fit with your other team members is there for a new employee?
Yeah, for me, this is a huge one. Like I personally value this a lot and spend a lot of time thinking about it when I'm doing my interview process. And to boil it down for people, it's really, for me, it's a couple things. One, we're a team. Everybody knows that, right? The Flyers are a team, but there's teams within the team. So there's the analytic team, there's a scouting team, there's a coaching team. So you have all these teams within teams, right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good you are, how much you know, or how smart you are if you can't be a good teammate. Work within a group, work within your teammates, help people, be of service to them, as Alex has talked about as well. So to me, that's huge, and just fostering a good team environment. And so I know you'll probably ask at some point in this talk about, how to get a job and things like that. And like the simplest thing I want people to understand is like, be a good teammate, and a lot of that is like how you treat people. So I think the person before us, I believe it was Peter, was talking about how people are treating people online and things like that. Like, we're watching, people are watching. And if you're a jerk and you're being rude to people, I don't want to work with you 12 hours a day, 365 days a year, because, outside of industry, the other thing about sport is it's so intense. It's so intense on a day-to-day basis, like Alex is talking, just the hours, the highs and lows, the wins and losses and things like that. And if you're a person that is showing poor judgment and character, and if I put you under a vice grip of pressure and exhaustion, I don't want to know how you're going to react amongst the rest of the team. So I need to make sure that we're all treating each other with respect. And I think that goes a long way. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. I could see how that could be really terrible if we made the wrong hire in that area.
Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said so far. one other thing I'd add is we brought both members of my group into the interview process as well. They helped design and come up with the different stages, and were sort of sitting in and asking questions as well. And I think we really tried to put candidates in a position to succeed, get all of themselves out there, both technically and, in terms of being able to think on your feet, and get your personality out there as well too. It's not a pressure cooker. We want you to be able to be yourself and go through and show us what you have, and your ability to come and be part of the team. The other thing too, I would say is, I think, I don't know if all of us feel this way, but our groups are still so small that we're not siloed. So the ability to kind of interplay and contribute in different areas, or at least challenge in different areas, is a plus. So if our data scientist is building a model, it's great for somebody on the other side of the spectrum to come over and say, hey, do you think about doing it this way? Or I was reading this, and maybe this is something you should look into. That's great. We love to hear things like that.
Jeremy, I'll stick with you for this next question, because we know Ian had it easy peasy in terms of buy-in from the top down. But I know this is a big thing, and it's continuous. I would suggest for all of us, no matter how much buy-in there is at different levels, there's always going to be someone you have to kind of sell on the idea, right? Or get buy-in from, whether it's a coach, a GM, whatever that role is. How do you work towards achieving buy-in? This is like the golden goose right here for all three of you.
Yeah, for sure. We know anytime we go up to management, the first question, I wrote it down: how do you impact the on-ice product and lead to wins? That's the first question I'm always going to get back is are you delivering that value in the end game? And it's a hard question to answer, because sometimes it takes a very long time to deliver on what you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes I know it's seen out there a lot. It's the poor decision you don't make that actually is the reward. So, how do you value that necessarily? But I think the tide's kind of turned where we've shifted from selling to getting demand. I think that's sort of the key moment where you're not trying to push an agenda and get on people's radar internally now. I think that's happening a lot around the league now, and you're sort of trying to, as I said earlier, manage that demand. And I think in terms of getting buy-in, honestly, it's just asking questions. Go to your coaching staff and say, what do you need? What are you not getting? What are you interested in? There was a piece on Calgary a while back, which I thought was great, about their group sort of sitting in with their coaching staff and just saying, what do you want to know? What do you want me to build? And I think if you can start to align there, that's your best chance for success. Sometimes it's just efficiency and process tools, and sometimes it's, influence on the process. So I think listening and asking questions is just truly the best way to do that.
Alex, how do you work towards getting buy-in from all your constituents?
No, I love that. We're in demand now, and I think that's a symbol of kind of winning across different groups. And certainly there's, different sort of departments within hockey operations are more reliant, or we're integrated more within the processes. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's just about sort of constantly showing utility, and oftentimes it's just about how can we make their current processes and jobs easier so that they can focus on sort of what, how does an amateur scout hopefully you guys can't hear a baby screaming in the background right now. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I could jump in, Alex. Help you out there. My kids are screaming upstairs, I'm sure too. The buy-in for me over a long period of time, this is my second general manager with the Philadelphia Flyers. I think I'm on my fourth coach now. So it's been a lot of change for me, and each time I've kind of taken the same approach, which is, nothing is set in stone. This, just because we've done things this way in the past with this person doesn't mean we have to do it that way. But these are the things that we found have been successful in the past. What do you think? It goes back to Jeremy's collaborative idea, and Alex has kind of talked about this too, is I think she used customer service as our role. And I would also, I've been saying we're like internal consultants, right? Like we're internal consultants saying, how can the business run better, more efficiently? optimize ourselves, like things like that. So taking a consultative approach is really has worked well, I think. For me, the longer I've been doing it, like maybe early on, I wasn't as good at that, and I've kind of learned that over time, and that's been a thing I've really tried to focus on as much as we can.
Here's another question from the audience, and I love this one. Jeremy, I'll toss it to you first. And I always think of the Kroenke example, and the question is, what lessons have you learned from analytics teams from other sports? Is there any collaboration between sister teams, i.e. ownership groups that might manage both? And I know even among this group here, there are some hires that have come from other sports, right? And brought their analytical prowess. So are there lessons you are learning or trying to learn from other sports?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Hockey's obviously been, in terms of data availability and progression here has been sort of at the back end of the curve, which is not a bad thing. It's been fun to sort of be the first through the door there, but absolutely. I think both, I guess you called it sort of the sister teams. I mean, we definitely use our local neighbors, the Red Sox and the Celtics. And the Celtics actually gave us a great idea. I'm not going to share it, but a product they were delivering to their coaching staff, which sort of triggered a aha moment of, okay, this is how we might be able to influence and impact more. So I think, yeah, there's so much to learn just by seeing, whether it's, baseball and the 20-person staffs and how they're deployed and what they're looking into for their edges, or, just success for implementation. I think absolutely. And these conferences are great for that, by the way, too. I mean, it's great to see work in soccer, work in football, and just kind of, it gets your brain going, and you can bring it back to your group and say, is there anything we can learn from this?
And what was the idea again?
Off limits.
Alex, I knew you specifically have someone on your team who worked with NFL teams before. Do you leverage that at all? How does that benefit you, or is it just not really an issue?
No, I mean, it's really nice to have people who worked in different sports, especially when you're thinking about something like tracking data, right? Namita coming to us from the Eagles, she was sort of in there when the NFL was trying to figure out what are we going to do with tracking data, and you kind of learn the pros and cons and the pitfalls. It is really nice because I can call Jeremy and Ian and we can talk at an extremely high level about our teams, but you never actually know what anyone else is doing. But it is when you call someone from another league, they're much more willing to talk specifics, right? Because we're not a threat, if you will, and that's where you can really sort of glean some best practices, which has been really useful.
Ian, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'll find out the answer to that question since I just hired Jeremy's intern to work for me. So I'm gonna get for day one. I'm gonna get that secret out of her. No, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, that's a good example where she's interned for Jeremy for a couple of months now, and she'll be able to come with some sort of knowledge of working with another NHL team on day one, which I think is huge. One gentleman on my staff was the director of basketball analytics for St. Joe's before he came to me. And then obviously I have somebody I just hired, Cole Anderson, from the public sphere, but also he's been working kind of like Alex talked about as a data scientist for, tech companies, basically. So he has a unique perspective from those experiences he's had outside of sport industry that I think is super valuable, obviously, or I wouldn't have hired him. But one thing that was interesting for me this last hiring that I just went through in the last few months was I had some really strong candidates from baseball. And it was fascinating talking to those candidates and hearing their experiences. And one gentleman I really, really liked, and if I could have, I would have hired him as well. I just ran out of seats, ran out of chairs, but it was interesting to see, and I kept peppering him and saying, how can we apply what you're doing and that idea to this, and really challenging that person in that area. And he had great ideas in terms of how to make that leap, right, from baseball to hockey, which is a different sport, but he understood the sport to a level that he could see his work impacting hockey. And that was what was exciting for him at the time. So I think we're going to see more of that in the upcoming years. I think there's going to probably be some changeover in sports if there hasn't been already. I think there's some other people I saw at Sloan, that are working for companies now and that were in basketball are now working in football, American football, and vice versa. So I think that it shows that the skills are transferable, and I think there's going to be more of that heading down the road, I believe.
Here's
And it'll
another,
be
oh,
one
go ahead.
last thing.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it'll be interesting. We haven't had it yet, I don't believe, to my knowledge. When like one of us goes to work for another team, you know what I mean? And when we have like cross team pollination or whatever you want to call it, because then you could really kind of take some of those ideas. And you see that in other sports, obviously, right? Like a guy from the Astros gets hired over here with this team, right? And he brings kind of some of that institutional knowledge. We're not there yet in the NHL, but it'll be interesting when that happens to see what comes out of that.
Here's another question from the audience that speaks to my heart. For those of you who know me, I'm very passionate about the successful communication that surrounds the work and the findings that people like yourselves and your teams do. And this question is, when looking at acquiring players and integrating into the team, how much does their language ability factor into these decisions? Is there a method or timeline for players, coaches, or others to become proficient in the operational language of the team? And I'll broaden this one a little bit too and say, how are you making sure that your team members are either maintaining or strengthening those communication skills to take their work out of the data and into a language that continues to reinforce buy-in? Jeremy, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it's a good challenge. And again, I think all three of us have talked about this at one point, because it's one thing to just keep going back to your group and then kind of delivering that message, but there's never any growth or opportunity for your group to improve. And also we can't be, talking to 40 staff members at once and managing that outreach. So I think, we work on sort of building up the messaging and trying to understand, okay, if you're going to send this email, let's walk through it. What does it look like? What's your message? Are you hitting on the high points or not? So there's a little bit of management there first, but our management's been really good too about exposure. So I think a lot of times our group can come into a meeting and listen and be there for a while first. You can kind of understand, okay, this is what the communication looks like. This is what we're talking about, to try to find, those opportunities or high points, and the group gets to know them as well. So they get to know how our group works and what each person's personality is like as well. So, it's always a work in progress, but I think that growth is really important.
Alex, how about you with your team and building up their communication?
No, great points. And, I'll give an example, when we talk about amateur meetings, Namita works a lot with the amateur draft, and we talk a lot with our amateur scouts. We're on every call that they have. And, she started writing reports this year, right? And I think that gives some buy-in, and the scouts sort of understand, they're putting an effort into understanding the analytics, if you will. They're not actually coding anything, but they're talking the language, they're understanding a little bit kind of the mechanics and the data that we're feeding into some of the models. And now she's going out sort of into the field, if you will, and trying to speak their language. And I think that helps her understand from a process perspective, what are they actually doing when they go to a game, sort of shadowing in that way. And I think it helps the synergy across those two.
Awesome. Ian, what strategies or tools have you employed?
I'll also be forthcoming here and say I've made a lot of mistakes over 8 years. You know what I mean? And the thing I come back to is 9 times out of 10, most of the mistakes I make are sharing too much, if that makes sense. And most, it's counterintuitive, right? Because you think, oh, I need to explain all of this work I've done, or this complex project, or this model, or whatever it might be. And at the end of the day, what I've sort of realized is most times than not in those cross-departmental settings, it's they just want to know what the end outcome is. It's yes or no, good or bad, up or down, stuff like that, right? And then if the person inquires further, well, why do you say that? Then you could say, okay, well, now here are the things. But 9 times out of 10, they just trust that you're the expert in that area, and that you're giving them an answer that says, this person's a good offensive impact, good defensive impact. He does this thing well, or he's trending down. Nobody's questioning that, because they realize that's your job, right? And And sometimes when I do take things to kind of like higher levels, up the chain, so to speak, the very first thing I'll say, usually in some of these like larger projects, is like, do you want to know how the sausage is made? And you know, most of the time it's like, no, I don't, you know, and that's fine. Like, you know, they don't have to know how it's exactly made every single time. You know, sometimes you say, well, let me explain some key points to you, or how it's made, because it'll help explain some of your objectives. So I think it's understanding where people are at. Like, do I have time to understand today this whole thing that's on the back end? Sometimes it's no. So you can pick another time to explain that to them, and maybe it's never, right? So just maybe starting that off, that goes back to my consultative approach, which is like, you know, what are you looking for? What is the outcome you're looking for? Is it a yes or no? Is it a number? Is it a buy or sell? Like, or do you really want to know the process? Is kind of a first step for me.
Outstanding. I want to respect all of your time. Thank you so much for the insights you shared. But we have just a couple minutes left. Maybe just quick rapid fire style. We of course got this question. Ian predicted we would have this question, which is, if I wanted to pursue a career in hockey analytics, what should I do? And the person who posted this question comes from a hockey background and doesn't necessarily have an analytical or data focused background. So maybe just some quick thoughts from everyone, how to get involved, either from a data perspective, if that's your background, or if it's hockey that is driving your experience to date. Jeremy, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I guess since it's rapid fire, I had written down a couple of things, echoing Ian's point earlier. Get yourself on the radar, whether that's direct contact or going to these conferences, doing work. Doesn't have to be hockey. I think passion's a key part of it, but it doesn't have to be passion for hockey. I think Alex kind of loosely said that earlier. You do need to, obviously, it is a taxing, you know, job at times, but I think if it's passion for new technology or just a way to impact, you know, you have to love what you're doing. And I think broad background too. I know Ian's kind of doing a good job of being honest here and commenting where he's learned. And I think for me, you know, I wanted to be in hockey and be a general manager from age, you know, 15. And I think that probably at the end of the day, I had a very limited, narrow focus, and I probably missed on some experiences where I could have broadened my horizons and become more well-rounded. So I'm sort of, you know, I've been on training and trying to learn and listen and you know, don't feel like you have to be doing hockey analytics right away, you know, stay broad. And so.
Yeah. Ian, your quick takeaways for people interested in getting hired, basically.
I'll try to be short here. One is to get in the door, you got to have technical chops, right? At this point, like we have existing, you know, technical infrastructure that on day one, I need to know that you can manage your way around that. So that's like, that gets you in the door. If you don't have the technical chops, I don't care what your passion is. I don't care if you're a former player. I don't care any of that stuff. I need to know that you can do the job. So that for me is like number one, that gets you in the door. Then number two would be, you know, this is me speaking. I don't want to speak for the group. So this is just me and how I manage my department is like, we're getting to the point now, I have 5 people. This is no longer a generalist job. This is now becoming the next person I hire. I want to have them say, where do you fit in my group? Where are you an expert at? Is that back-end development? Is it machine learning? Is it modeling? Is it prospects like Alex talked about? So like kind of having something that you can fall back on and say, I'm an maybe not even an expert is the right word, because that makes it sound like you need all this experience, but having a thing that you're really passionate about or that you can step in and do, it helps me see where you fit on my team. And then 3 is just really people that are inquisitive, that have like active minds, that can see something in a game and say, translate that to a research problem. It's a tough skill to get that. But that is something I look for too. It's more like creativity and like how you think, you know, is kind of the 3rd prong. And then the last thing I'll say for the group and the people out there that want jobs is like, there's no path, you know, there's no, you know, one path anymore, you know, like, so I look at my team and it's like, I came out of nowhere. One guy on my team started with Lockheed Martin and working with missiles and satellites and worked in basketball. Another person on my team, you know, worked in web development before in industry, right? And Cole's worked in tech, and Katie, who I just hired, works for a college team. So like, if you just look at my team, there's no path. So that should be the good news for everybody, is that you don't have to fit one specific box. You can come from any different angle. If you kind of follow that 3-step process I gave you, I think it'll serve a lot of people well.
And Alex, the final word is yours.
Well, Jeremy and Ian both covered it really well. I guess what I'll say, is especially when you're going through the hiring process, or if you're cold emailing someone, being, I guess, very targeted, and here's my objective. If you want to talk to me for 15 minutes, like, just write in the email you want a job. Like, that's totally fine. Give me the quick hits, why you're qualifying. Make my job easy when we're hiring. And I think, people, you used to be able to get in the door, as Ian said, kind of without the technical know-how. Maybe you can learn on the job. Like, that's not the case anymore. You have to be able, Excel no longer works for, I would guess, every analytics department. But maybe I'm hoping that maybe some of them still are using Excel.
Yeah.
So
I crazy VLOOKUPs there somewhere.
I do want to say, though, I think it's important, again, not to speak for the group, like, it's not this unattainable ideal we're looking for. I think, again, in our hiring process, like, we just hired 2 new staff and they just had bachelor degrees. You don't need to get a master's or a PhD or anything like that. They had, like Ian said, good real life working experience. And, it's not like it's this unattainable thing. We know we're competing with industry, and we want to make sure that, we want to find the right people for our teams, but we also don't want to, scare off people from chasing this dream, because I think it is important to, groups are growing, and it's growing league wide, and we want to make sure that we're fostering that passion.
Well, on behalf of everyone who has had the pleasure of learning from the 3 of you for the past 45 minutes, thank you all so much. It's been an honor to have you be part of OTTHAC this year. You guys are just all amazing. We appreciate you. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. With that, I will turn it back over to Michael, I believe. And again, thank you all.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you, Alison.
thanks.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Jeremy, Alison, Ian, and Alexandra. That was great. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we will come back at the top of the hour. We'll see you in a couple.